Good evening, members. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, members of the public. Welcome to this evening's meeting of the Local Plan Advisory Committee, which is just what we are. We go through the detail of the local plan proposals, and the decisions are made by the Cabinet of the Council and then subsequently the full Council. Do I have any apologies for absence? I think we do. Everyone's here tonight. Any declarations of interest? No declarations of interest. Thank you. So item 3 is
the one that we normally make. Sorry.
Just wait for the motorbike to pass. Just go and check that the system. So just one sec, Phil, while Alex checks that the system is turned up to full. Otherwise, we will need to speak louder.
I'll do my best. What I was going to say, Chair.
Is that better? Good. I'm glad at least you can hear. Thank you, Phil.
I was just going to say, Chair, just the standing declaration of interest in that we're obviously 3 of us are County Council.
Okay, we'll take that as read. Thank you. Right. So item 3 then is the public speaking, which we set aside for 30 minutes for. I have a list of people that have submitted questions or to speak, and I'll take those first. Where we've had a written question, the officers will read out the response, and then the copies will be available for anyone who wants them. So we'll go to the first one then, and in fact that is Councillor Neil Bannister. You're representing Willoughby Waterleys Residents Association tonight, is that right, Neil? Okay, if you want to come to the speakers table, you've got 3 minutes when you're ready.
Yes, good evening, panel. As Chairman said, this is a question submitted by the Willoughby Waterleys Resident Association. I've been asked to present it. Its spokesman is away, and I am the local ward councillor. This is their question. There is a preamble to the question. It begins. In the Regulation 19 Consultation Local Plan, it was stated that 13,182 homes were required in the plan period to 2041. After completions already achieved and existing commitments, a further 6,422 homes were identified for delivery in the plan period to meet that target. This meant that an excess of 1,657 homes was being provided for, which equates to an 18.5% buffer of the undelivered element. This was already excessive. Paragraph 79B of the 2023 NPPF states that a buffer of 20% is required where an authority has undelivered by providing less than 80% of target in the previous 3 years. Harbour District does not meet that criteria, so a lesser buffer would have been entirely appropriate. So has this been addressed in the proposed submission plan? The answer is no. It has been made worse with a buffer provision now of almost 24%. In the 1,500 plus page pack, at page 1,467, there's a schedule of proposed modifications. This is Appendix I, made to the Regulation 19 plan. At page 1,470, modification of 4.8 is referred to and sets out an increase to the buffer of 2,142 homes. As a percentage of the yet-to-be-delivered 8,968 homes, that is 23.9%. Now, this is described merely as a minor modification. We do not agree. An increase of almost 500 homes completed by 2041 is very significant. With 1,200 homes forecast from land south of Gartree Road to 2041, its removal from the plan would result in a reduced buffer of 942.
30 seconds now.
That would equate to a 10.5% buffer. The improvement of delivery from Lutterworth East would further increase this buffer. WWRA's question to officers and members is this. Will you amend the submission plan to exclude the deeply flawed and unviable allocation at land south of Gartree Road and reconsider it if it's still required for the next plan review? Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you very much. So now I'll ask the head of service, Tess Nelson, to read out the reply that's been prepared.
Thank you, Chair. Can I just double check everyone's okay to hear? Is that better? Does that help? How's that? Okay. Response to that question has got a lot of figures in, so apologies in advance. We'll obviously make it available for people to review in full. The question focuses on the calculation of a contingency in the supply of housing land against the housing requirement and whether there is sufficient contingency to allow the land south of Gartree Road allocation to be removed from the plan. In short, the answer is no. There is not excessive contingency. The local plan contingency is not large enough to allow removal of the land south of Gartree Road and still protect the 5-year supply of housing land into the future. And I'll just explain those figures. So the housing requirement is 13,182, as stated in the question. The housing supply in the proposed submission local plan, i.e. the local plan that was published in March 2025, was 14,839. The difference between these two figures is the contingency figure. This is a normal part of plan making. The contingency allows for unexpected circumstances affecting the supply of housing in the future. This could include slower than expected delivery on particular sites or a lower yield on sites. The purpose of the contingency is to protect our 5-year housing land supply throughout the plan period. Without this contingency, a slight delay in the delivery of any site or simply a house builder building slightly slower than expected would result in Harbour District Council no longer having a 5-year land supply and leaving the district at risk of speculative development again. The proposed submission local plan was based on the 2023 housing monitoring position, which was the latest available at the time. Since then, the housing completions and commitments data has been updated to 2025. This has increased the number of houses already built or committed from 8,417 in 2023 to 8,902 in 2025. This increases the total supply, including planned growth, from 14,839 to 15,324. Really importantly, this doesn't change the number of houses being planned for in the local plan. It merely updates the information about the number of houses already built or committed. The contingency is calculated by comparing housing supply with the total housing requirement. This provides that in the proposed submission local plan, the contingency was 1,657 dwellings, or 12.6% of the total housing requirement. In the proposed modifications, which forms Appendix I to the Cabinet report, the updated commitments and completions to 2025 provides for a local plan contingency of 2,142. This is 16% of the total housing requirement. Housing contingency is generally calculated as a percentage of total housing requirement rather than just residual requirement, which is why the percentages are slightly different to outlined in the question. A local plan contingency of between 10 and 20% of total housing requirement is normal, and the planning inspector will be looking for a reasonable contingency to ensure the effectiveness of the local plan in meeting future housing needs. The size of the contingency does change throughout the plan preparation process. This is due to the annual updating of the housing monitoring information. In the currently adopted local plan, for example, the contingency at proposed submission stage was 12.9%. This increased to 14.5% at adoption. The higher the contingency, the more likely that a 5-year land supply will be maintained. So that's contingency. Buffer is a slightly separate point. The question draws upon a separate requirement within the NPPF in relation to the calculation of 5-year land supply. When calculating a 5-year land supply, a 5 or 20% buffer is applied, depending on previous delivery record. However, the references in the question to the 20% buffer and delivery of 80% of housing requirement are not part of the housing requirement contingency in relation to local plan. Buffer and contingency are actually different things, although they sound remarkably similar. But the buffer, as set out in the NPPF, is used for calculating 5-year land supply. Contingency is used in plan making. So the national policy on use of the buffer I set out below, and you'll see in the detailed response. I've quoted the current NPPF because although this plan is being prepared under transitional arrangements, which allows for the 2023 NPPF to be used in plan making, for the purposes of calculating 5-year land supply, we are required to use the current version of the NPPF, which is the 2024 version. So in relation to land south of Gartree Road, should the land south of Gartree Road allocation be removed from the planned housing supply in the local plan, this would reduce the contingency from 2,142 dwellings to 942. This would be 7.1% of the total housing requirement. A contingency of this scale could be interpreted by an inspector as insufficient and could risk a future inability to demonstrate a 5-year land supply were the plan to be adopted on this basis. If that were to be the case, it would return the district to the current situation and further speculative unplanned development. This is not recommended. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Neil.
Thank you.
Right, the next question I have is from Alexandra Sword. You'd like to come forward, please? I've got your question headed, stop the new town. Ah, right. Resident of Great Glen Parish.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, thank you. That's correct. I live in the parish of Great Glen in Stretton Hall. The submission of the local plan for examination is premature and unsound in whole or in part. I would like to address the defined area of separation for Great Glen referred to in the draft under landscape, LAN and NLP1 and policy SA02. The area of separation study 2024 defined AOS except for Stretton Hall, Great Glen and Oldby. There were no AOS defined in the Great Glen neighbourhood plan because there was no concern of coalescence between settlements. The land was agricultural farmland that did not fall under the evaluation criteria. However, in light of the emerging strategic development area called Stalton, land south of Gartree Road with land at Stretton Hall Farm, identifies as land that lies adjacent to a gap, and that is the gap of two individual settlement identities, Oldby and Stretton Hall, Great Glen. There is a physical and visual separation with a clear boundary, no visual association with each other, and lacking in road infrastructure. The study states existing separation between Oldby and Stretton Hall is weaker than the separation between Stretton Hall and Great Glen. However, Stretton Hall Drive is adjacent to Leicester Grammar School in Great Glen and further from Oldby. The council chose to review of existing and potential areas and failed to do correct assessment at Great Glen. The report refers to gaps between Stretton Hall and Great Glen and not Oldby and Stretton Hall. It is misleading, inaccurate and has no credible evidence. Subsequently, the defined AOS is unjustified. The risk of merging is at its greatest between Oldby and Stretton Hall. This is where area of separation is required. The outline application for 450 houses at land north of London Road lies within Great Glen, and AOS is not required. The outline application for 180 houses on land south of London Road narrows the gap not only towards Oldby but also Newton Harcourt. 5 hectares as defined area of separation is allocated to the traveling show people site for 36 units. Units, machinery, vehicles and trailers are not the definition and approach to use of land that fulfills a sense of separation. It does not fit the physical, perceptual and value criteria of AOS, and such developments are typically directed away from, not towards, protected landscapes like AOS.
30 seconds.
My questions are, will the council find alternative allocations for AOS in Great Glen other than the 5-hectare London Road? Will the council find alternative sites for travelling show people other than on greenfields? And will the council move defined AOS where appropriate between Oadby and Stratton Hall and not Stratton Hall and the village of centre of Great Glen? Thank you.
So we didn't have this one in writing. Okay, so we didn't have your question in writing. That doesn't matter. We will still provide you with an answer. I'll just ask the officers if they want to respond or in a position to respond to any of that tonight, or whether they prefer to give you a written response. Tess.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your question. We'll do a written response for you. Just to clarify, my understanding, I think your question is, why is the area of separation between Stratton Hall proposed to be between Stratton Hall and Great Glen rather than between Oadby and Stratton Hall? Am I understanding that correctly?
That is correct, and it's also the fact that you're putting the AOS where it's not relevant, and that's what I'm questioning.
Okay, thank you.
Could you explain, because I want to make sure you get an answer, could you explain that second part where you're saying we put the council, the local plan proposes to make an area of AOS and it's not correct, it's not the right place? Is that what you're saying? Could you explain that further, please?
So in the local plan for area of separation in Great Glen, the allocated allocation is at the 5 hectares, which is supposed to be the travelling show people site, and it's greenfield right now, and it's basically not complying with the policy of
Right, so what you're saying is that within an area of separation, that use is not a suitable use in an area of separation.
That's correct, yes.
Okay, that's the question you want addressed. Okay, I've got it.
Thank you so much for clarifying. Yes. So yeah, we can answer this one. And it is complicated because there are 2 policies overlaying each other. So we've got the land south of Gartree Road allocation, which, as we know, covers a large area of land. What we've also got is the area of separation proposal, which covers part of the land south of Gartree Road proposal. And I can absolutely see the complication. So the area of separation proposal is essentially to ensure that the land south of Gartree Road development doesn't lead to the coalescence of Stratton Hall and Great Glen. So it's to protect the identity of Great Glen. So where those 2 policy areas apply, essentially the area of separation is there to prevent the larger site seeing development in that part. So although the area in question forms part of the land south of Gartree Road proposal, we wouldn't be looking for built development on it. So it is likely that in master planning the site, that area of separation would be where the open space would fall. So it fulfills 2 functions. It provides the open space for the built development within land south of Gartree Road, but it is still retained as open land to prevent the coalescence of those settlements.
We'll ensure you get a written reply.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next question, question 3, is from Mr. Henri Winnan. If you'd like to come forward, please. And I've got this down as Stop the New Town Part 1. Is that correct?
It's address number one, and just not wanting to make a final point of it, it's Dr. Winon. Thank you. So, Chair, members, I will confine myself to examination risk. The advisory panel calls a concern. The issue before you is not whether growth should occur, but whether this plan as drafted is likely to proceed through examination without significant modification or delay. My question is this: what assessment has the Council made of the likelihood of main modifications being required in relation to three specific areas? First, the strategic development area allocation itself. Second, infrastructure phasing and funding mechanisms. And third, the affordable housing policy as it applies to large marginal sites. In other words, given the acknowledged marginal viability of the land south of Gartree Road SDA, highlighted by Harbour District Council's own consultants, and the continuing evolution of infrastructure discussion with Leicestershire County Council, it would be helpful to understand whether officers anticipate that the inspector may require significant changes to policy wording, delivery assumption, or percentages. If so, what is the estimated scale of that risk? Following this, if significant main modifications are required, particularly to spatial strategy, infrastructure triggers, or affordable housing, what is the Council's estimate of the resulting delays to adoption? Experience elsewhere shows that substantial modifications can extend examination timetables materially and often into several years. Has that scenario been modelled, including additional costs, and what would be the practical impact on the plan program? Finally, if the inspector concludes that the plan is unsound in whole or in part, whether on justification or effectiveness grounds, what contingency planning has been undertaken? Is there an agreed pathway for withdrawal, redrafting, or partial resubmission? And has the program and resources implication of that possibility been considered? These are not rhetorical questions. They go directly to program certainty and risk management. And as an advisory panel tasked with advising the Cabinet, it would be helpful to understand the Council's performance assessment. Dr. Understood. It would be helpful to understand the Council's own assessments of examination, vulnerability, and the realism of the current timetable. Thank you.
Okay. Tessa Nelson, Head of Service, will answer your question. When she's done that, I'm also going to ask her to, because you've been making this comment about viability at several meetings now, and I'm concerned about that. So I have asked for some response to be given on that to you tonight. So if we deal with the question first, Tess, and then if you would then answer this question that keeps coming up about viability. Thank you.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Dr. Winon, for the question. So I'll take each question one at a time, if I may, and just sort of work through them. So the first question around what assessment has been made of the likelihood of main modifications in those three areas. The answer is the Council hasn't undertaken an assessment specifically in relation to those three areas. As you may have seen in the Cabinet papers, in order to support the examination process, the Council has identified a number of proposed modifications to submit to the inspector for their consideration, and those are set out Appendix A of the Cabinet report. The planning inspector will explore the potential for main modifications throughout the examination and will recommend main modifications if asked to do so by the Council. This is an entirely normal part of the examination and occurs in just about every local plan prior to adoption. There is further guidance from the Inspectorate, and I've included the link. It's called the Procedure Guide for Local Plan Examinations. The Council will be guided by the Inspector in terms of where main modifications are necessary and the nature of the change to the plan required. Any main modifications will be consulted on fully. Next question around infrastructure and the risk of further modifications. The inspector's role is to examine whether the submitted plan meets the test of soundness defined in the NPPF. The inspector's conclusions will be based on a consideration of all the evidence and on the application of professional expertise and judgment. Officers are not in a position to prejudge the outcome of the inspector's consideration of the local plan and associated documentation, plus any further evidence, whether written or verbal, that will be presented to the inspector during the examination process. Clearly, we haven't seen that. So the risk of the inspector identifying the need for main modifications is not considered to be an issue in the way implied. Main modifications are usual and a really helpful part of plan making to make amendments to the plan as a result of further discussion and the recommendations of the inspector. This is an important part of plan making and it helps to ensure that the resultant adopted local plan serves to meet its objectives for the benefit of current and future residents. Next question is around main modifications to the spatial strategy, infrastructure and affordable housing. And various scenarios which are asked around. The examination process is within the control of the planning inspectorate rather than the council. Therefore, the council's estimates of likely timeframes are just that, estimates. Each local plan examination is unique and the time taken entirely dependent on the individual circumstances of the plan and the examination. However, the Planning Minister's letter to the Inspectorate in July 2024 is significant, and again, I've included a link. It amends previous procedures and instead advises that local plan examinations be paused for no more than 6 months to allow further work to be undertaken. This changes previous procedures to avoid the delays seen at previous local plan exams and referred to in the question. Finally, the question around potential pathways for withdrawal, redrafting or partial resubmission. There is no agreed pathway for some of these simply because they're not allowed for in the relevant legislation. The Planning Inspectorate's procedural guide for local plan examinations explains the legislation, which is the Planning and Compulsory Purchase Act of 2004, allows for 3 possible outcomes to the examination. 1, the inspector finds that the plan is sound and legally compliant as submitted. 2, the inspector finds that the plan is unsound and or legally non-compliant as submitted, but that it's possible to make it sound and legally compliant by making main modifications to it. In these circumstances, the inspector must recommend the necessary main modifications if requested to do so by the local planning authority. The main modifications must relate directly to the reasons why the inspector has found the plan unsound or legally non-compliant. And this is the situation for most local plans. And thirdly, the third option is the inspector finds the plan unsound and or legally non-compliant as submitted, and it's not possible to make it sound and legally compliant by making main modifications to it. So at the end of the examination, the inspector will produce a report for the local planning authority setting out the recommendation and the reasons for them. The report is not binding on the local planning authority, but the local planning authority, in this case, Harbour District Council, may not adopt an unsound plan. So the council will be guided by the inspector's recommendations, which will be one of those 3 options, and will take further action accordingly. Thank you.
Okay, Tess. So we've covered.
So thank you.
No, I'm afraid there's no supplementary.
No, there's no supplementary. I just want to say thank you. Just noting that some of the questions I've asked have not been answered. So I look forward to reading the statement. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. Now we're just going to address this issue of viability. When you're ready, please, Tess, because Dr. Winham's raised raised this on a number of occasions.
Yes, of course. Thank you. So viability obviously is a really significant issue, and we've seen that across the district in relation to a number of sites. So we, as part of the evidence base for the local plan, we've done extensive modelling of viability. So we've done it both on a plan-wide basis and then for each individual sites, as you've seen. So the viability assessment for land south of Gartree Road identified the site as being marginally viable, which sounds negative. It actually is viable. It's just not as viable as some of particularly the smaller sites with lower infrastructure requirements. So that work was completed a year or so ago and published last March. Since then, as I understand it, further work has been undertaken by the landowners, Urban and Civic, and in conjunction with Homes England. And Homes England clearly have a couple of roles here. They are both partly landowner and partly clearly have a government objective to deliver homes. So further work has been undertaken to assess the viability of the site, and indeed that work is ongoing and will conclude once a planning application is submitted and a full viability assessment is submitted by the applicant. We've obviously been working with Homes England to understand the situation in regards to land south of Gartree Road. And what we're advised is that the site was identified under the government's New Homes Accelerator programme back in 2024. As a result, considerable effort has been undertaken to ensure the viability of this site. Homes England are working through a strategic outline business case for the project. And that is in order to bring forward additional funding that may be required to accelerate delivery of this scheme and ensure that upfront infrastructure is available at the time required. So further details of that will come forward, I would imagine, during the planning application submission process, but it was really just to provide that bit of an update, which hasn't, I believe Homes England haven't made that public, but are happy for us to help explain that as part of tonight's debate. So I hope that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure, we'll come back to this issue. Right, question 4. I hope I got your name right. Steve Trio. Go on then. Yeah, Trio. Right, thank you. Would you like to ask your question, please?
I would like to ask my question. Everybody can hear me, I hope. Chair and members, I will confine my statement to infrastructure certainty, both for the strategic development area and for the broader plan, because deliverability across the whole plan period requires clarity in these areas. I would be grateful if the officers would specifically, and I understand that it would be in writing, but could specifically answer yes or no. With respect to the education provisions, not just for the strategic development area, but for the plan's growth locations, can officers confirm, first, whether the education land requirements are now fully defined in terms of quantum, location, and type of provision, yes or no? Second, whether the associated build costs for that education provision are fully costed and agreed in principle with the relevant education authority, yes or no? Third, whether the funding sources for that education provision are clearly identified and secured, whether through S106, direct delivery, third-party capital funding, or other mechanisms, yes or no? And finally, whether there is an agreed delivery partner and a phasing program aligned with housing delivery across the plan. With specific requests to highways, both for the strategic development plan and other major growth locations, can officers confirm whether the total highways mitigation works required under the plan are fully costed and formally agreed with Leicestershire County Council. If they are not fully agreed, can officers confirm that the elements remain subject to ongoing discussion? Finally, with respect to a potential future community infrastructure levy, can officers confirm if it is correct that the levy has not yet been prepared, consulted on, upon, or examined? Can officers confirm if it is correct that the levy would not apply to affordable housing floor space? Can officers confirm if it is correct that the levy cannot be applied retrospectively to permissions granted before adoption? If those points are correct, can officers confirm whether there is currently any adopted and operational levy regime in place and that can be relied upon to fund infrastructure required under the plan? My intent is to clarify whether the infrastructure underpinning the plan, both at the strategic development level and district-wide level, is fully defined, costed, and secured at this stage, or whether material elements remain contingent. Thank you.
Thank you for your questions. I'll ask the Director of Planning, David Atkinson, to reply to each question.
Thank you, Chairman. So yes, thank you for the questions, Mr. Trier. The first question was relating to whether the education land requirements are now fully defined in terms of quantum. So the answer to that is yes. Significant work is underway to define education requirements across the plan's growth locations. Discussions remain ongoing with the local education authority, and consultants have been commissioned to prepare an education strategy and delivery plan through a joint working group, including the local education authority, Harbour District Council, Oadby and Wigston Borough Council, and Homes England. The consultants are working closely with the local education authority to review school capacities, pupil forecasts, and related strategies, and to model pupil yields across all planning areas in both districts. The modelling incorporates site allocations from both emerging plans as well as informed assumptions regarding speculative development. Different scenarios are being developed to ensure that new education infrastructure can be phased efficiently and sustainably across the strategic development area and wider districts. Emerging recommendations are expected within a couple of months. The final quantum, location and type of education provision will be confirmed through the Education Strategy and Delivery Plan, which is intended to be consulted upon and adopted to inform the Harbour District Council local plan examination hearings. The second question was around associated build costs for that education provision, and are they fully costed and agreed in principle with the Education Authority? Yes or no? Yes, work is underway to establish robust cost estimates for education provision linked to the ongoing development of the Education Strategy and Delivery Plan. Consultants are preparing an evidence-based range of cost estimates for new and expansion education provision. These estimates were based on current Department for Education employer requirements and will take into account land equalisation and any site-specific adjustments or abnormal costs. Final costed solutions have not yet been presented to or agreed with the local education authority. Turning to the third question, the funding sources for that education provision, and are they clearly identified and secured through 106, direct delivery, third-party capital funding, etc.? Yes, the Education Strategy and Delivery Plan is actively developing a clear framework for funding education infrastructure. The work currently underway.
Hold on, let the director finish the question, the answer.
Thank you, Chairman. The work currently underway is exploring the full range of capital funding options, including Section 106 contributions, direct delivery and third-party funding, to ensure the named education projects are delivered at the right time alongside development. It's also providing model Section 106 clauses and definitions, creating certainty for developers and the local planning authority and the county council, whilst allowing balancing payments to reflect final development mixes. The next element was on education again, and it's is there a agreed delivery partner and a phasing programme aligned with housing delivery across the plan? So delivery partners, exact phasing and confirmed site allocations will be determined through the completion and adoption of the education strategy and delivery plan. So there will be, yes, which is the answer to that. And then highway mitigation, I think was a question. Ongoing works going on with the local highway authority, Leicestershire County Council. Works underway on some modifications to the plan that will make the plan stronger and more resilient in terms of the highway strategy. Shall I move straight on to community infrastructure levy, Chairman?
Yes.
Community infrastructure levy questions. Is it correct SIL has not yet been prepared, consulted upon or examined? Yes, that's correct. SIL has not yet been prepared, consulted on or examined. Work is underway to develop a draft charging schedule with consultation plan for summer 2026 and examination to follow thereafter. Is it correct SIL would not apply, to affordable housing floor space? Absolutely yes. In practical terms, affordable housing floor space does not pay SIL where it qualifies for social housing relief. Affordable housing, including shared ownership, is residential development and is therefore liable for SIL in principle. However, it's eligible for 100% social housing relief, meaning no SIL is payable, provided the qualifying criteria are met and the homes remain as social affordable housing. Social housing relief applies to a range of affordable housing products, including social rent, affordable rent, intermediate rent and shared ownership. Relief is typically available where homes are provided by a local authority or registered provider, and in some cases by other bodies where regulatory requirements are met. Details of the provision are set out in regulation, and we can include a link to that regulation in the written response that we provide. The next part of the question was, is it correct SIL cannot be applied retrospectively to permissions granted before adoption? Yes, SIL cannot be applied retrospectively to planning permissions granted before a charging schedule takes effect. SIL only applies to development grant permitted after the date a charging schedule is adopted and comes into force. Permissions granted before adoption are not subject to SIL. The next question, or part of the question, is if those points are correct, can officers confirm whether there is currently any adopted and operational SIL regime in place that can be relied upon to fund infrastructure in the plan? Yes, in principle, SIL is a mechanism the Council intends to put in place to fund infrastructure. In principle, support was given by Harbour District Council's Cabinet on the 9th of February to progress SIL for the district, contingent upon the outcomes of detailed viability work that's ongoing. Once a charging schedule is adopted and operational, SIL payments can be collected and used to fund infrastructure projects required to support the plan. At present, technical work is ongoing to progress towards consultation on a draft charging schedule, and that's anticipated in summer 2026. An examination similar to a local plan examination will subsequently follow after consultation. Until adoption, there's no enforceable SIL regime in place, and therefore it cannot yet be relied upon to fund infrastructure. Any infrastructure funding must at this stage continue to rely on other mechanisms such as Section 106 agreements, developer contributions or alternative funding streams. And then the final part of the question are simply to clarify whether the infrastructure underpinning the plan, both at the SDA and district-wide level, is fully defined, costed and secured, or whether material elements remain contingent. Infrastructure underpinning the plan, both at the SDA and district-wide level, has been identified to support the delivery of the development. Strategic requirements are set out in the infrastructure delivery plan and associated schedule, and mechanisms such as Section 106 agreements, developer contributions and future community infrastructure levy are in place to ensure delivery. Further detail and refinement are progressing as part of normal plan making. Local transport mitigation measures have been refined and costed to ensure they are robust and proportionate. Education provision will be confirmed in detail as individual sites come forward, allowing flexibility to respond to local needs. Work on a SIL charging schedule is ongoing, which will provide a further funding mechanism once adopted. This staged approach reflects the iterative nature of infrastructure planning and delivery, ensuring that infrastructure delivery is viable, flexible and aligned with the best interests of the community, whilst making a clear framework to secure all necessary contributions as the plan is implemented. Thank you, Chairman. I'll hand back to you.
Okay. Thank you very much. You will get a written.
If I could just make one comment. A lot of the answers were yes, and then the explanation was no, or maybe. And I just want to.
Right, the last question, speaker is from Caroline Foster, a Development Director from Urban and Civic. And I don't think she's here, but I would like to answer you've got a response, haven't you? Good. Yeah. Do you want to go through that then, please?
So Caroline Foster represents Urban and Civic, the master developers on the site, and she's asked me to read out a statement from them. First part of her statement is on viability. Urban and Civic would not bring this site forward if it were not deliverable. They are the largest and most experienced master developer in the country. They can assure all parties that infrastructure spend will commence as soon as planning permission is granted. The council is working closely with Urban and Civic on agreeing the magnitude of financial investment required to enable the whole site to be delivered. By Urban and Civic taking the site through local plan making processes means that an independent government inspector will endorse the deliverability of the scheme. Transport and highways is the next topic she asked me to mention. Urban and Civic are meeting regularly to agree and scope out necessary highway improvements, together with improvements to bus travel and public transport in general, including the design and delivery of a new public transport enabling through route from the A6 to Gartrey Road. They're committed to ensuring the route is future-proofed and to accord with potential strategic aspirations. This is being achieved by safeguarding additional land, and the detailed design will be finalised in the coming months. Next, on education, the development is providing above what is required to accommodate needs arising from the development. Urban and Civic are aware of the secondary school capacity issues locally, and the master developer is thereby providing more land than would be needed by this development to be able to accommodate education needs on other nearby sites as well as this site. As Homes England have stated, their investment committee have endorsed the proposals to prepare a strategic outline business case for the project by late spring 2026. This will enable early delivery of the primary and secondary schools required. The approach precisely follows the award-winning Halton Academy at Rugby. The site is a government accelerator site, which further strengthens this position. On flooding, Urban and Civic's flood risk mitigation will ensure a 20% betterment compared to the existing position. In addition, Urban and Civic are investing additional funding to create a new 225-acre parkland area between the development and Great Glen to further reduce the impacts of existing river flows on that village. Proposed improvements will create more capacity to cope with floodwater and ease pressure further downstream. At least an additional £1 million is being invested in these further improvements. Affordable housing, Urban and Civic are working with Homes England and the District Council to maximise the amount of affordable housing on the site that is consistent with planning policy objectives. On community infrastructure levy, significant investment is being made directly in the site, with Section 106, potentially community infrastructure levy, and other complementary funding sources being available to jointly fund the provision of its infrastructure to support delivery of the development. On public engagement, Urban and Civic are keen to start engagement with the community around the site as soon as possible and anticipated doing this from now moving forward. In fact, they asked me to mention if anyone in the community has any questions or queries on the development or would like a representative of Urban and Civic to arrange a public engagement session or event with them, please send all requirements to, and there's an email address, and we can provide that email address detail in the papers that are circulated afterwards. An anticipated planning application. Urban and Civic anticipate they're targeting the submission of a planning application or applications to Harbour District Council and Oakley and Wigston Borough Council, as the site is a cross-boundary site, in the summer of 2026. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you for that. Right, that completes the speakers. We'll now move on to item 4. That is the Cabinet Papers with the proposed local plan submission. So they've been published now since last week, available for anyone to look at on the Council's website. And these are the papers that the Cabinet will consider at its meeting next Monday. So I'm now going to ask Tess Nelson to introduce the report.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. So there are a lot of pages in this report and a lot of appendices, so I will just give you the highlights. As we know, plan making is a statutory responsibility. We have what's called a plan-led system in England, which means that all authorities are required to produce a local plan. So the Cabinet report essentially seeks approval of the local plan for submission to the Secretary of State for examination. The local plan that is being proposed for submission is the proposed submission local plan, which was published on the 10th of March 2025 for an 8-week period of public consultation in accordance with Regulation 19. Consultation responses following publication are summarised in the consultation statement, which is Appendix E. There are two parts to this. There's the main Appendix E, which is an analysis of the responses. There is then a detailed spreadsheet. It's a landscape spreadsheet and it's right at the bottom of the Cabinet papers if you haven't spotted it. It sets out all of the consultation responses, not just obviously on Land South of Gartree Road, on the entire local plan. The spreadsheet can be filtered. So it's currently set in plan order, so you can see from comments on the vision at the top and comments on the appendices at the bottom. You can filter it in other orders and you can search for individual respondents. If you need any assistance, please do contact one of the team and we can help with that. So the consultation statement at Appendix E summarises all of the consultation responses. All of those have been reviewed and analysed. All of the issues raised are considered appropriate to be addressed through the examination process. Officers consider the local plan to be ready for examination. That means we consider it to be capable of being found sound and to meet relevant legal requirements. As such, the recommendation is to submit the local plan together with the evidence base and all of the necessary submission documents to the Secretary of State. Post-submission, the examination process will commence. It will involve a thorough consideration by the inspector of all of the representations and all of the issues raised. And within the Cabinet report are a number of the key issues raised in the consultation responses. So these are the issues that we will be drawing the inspector's attention to, and the inspector will no doubt turn to first. Delegated authority is also sought through the recommendations to enable the Director of Planning, in conjunction with the planning portfolio holder, to make suitable modifications to the local plan as part of the examination process, as recommended by the inspector. The final recommendation is for the local plan to be endorsed as a material consideration in the determination of planning applications. Upon adoption, the local plan will become part of the development plan and will be given that statutory status. In the meantime, the local plan, as is currently drafted, has some weight in determining planning applications, and that the weight to be attached to it will increase as the local plan examination process continues. Just to draw your attention to a couple of elements within the report itself and some of the probably more significant appendices. So Appendix A, as I've mentioned, is the local plan. So it's the proposed submission local plan that was published for consultation in March 2025. Appendix E that I've mentioned is probably where people will be most interested. This is the summary of the consultation responses. The Cabinet report highlights the most commented upon policies. That was the vision, DSO1, which is to do with the number and location of houses, DSO2, which is about the number and location of economic development, DSO5, which is around supporting strategic infrastructure, and SAO1, which is the site allocations policy. So all of those representations will be sent to the Planning Inspectorate, and our analysis and summary of the key issues raised will also be sent. The Cabinet report goes through and identifies what those key issues are, and I won't go through those in detail, but perhaps I'll just draw everyone's attention to those main headings. So those main issues focus on the development strategy, transport, housing numbers, housing allocations, and I've pulled out the main issues raised in relation to the most commented upon policies. There are, of course, lots of additional detail in the Appendix E. Provision for gypsy travellers and travelling show people, and strategic distribution. The Cabinet report also explains the proposed modifications. We've mentioned them a couple of times this evening, but just to avoid any doubt. So the proposed modifications don't have any statutory status at this stage. The inspector may consider those proposed modifications helpful and may consider it appropriate to discuss those as part of the examination through the hearing sessions. This is entirely dependent on the inspector. Depending on the outcome of those discussions, the inspector may decide some of those proposed modifications could form the basis of main modifications, which is the set of changes which does go out for public consultation and which ultimately could amend the adopted version of the local plan. So I've summarised some of those proposed modifications. Some of those are factual updates. Some of those are strengthening. So we've strengthened the policy on infrastructure to allow the potential introduction of the SIL. We've proposed to add a number of technical requirements. These are mainly resulting from statutory consultees. For example, Leicestershire County Council have asked for minerals assessments to be required. An Environment Agency has asked for a number of additional requirements to be added to policy. We've added or proposed to add a requirement for comprehensive master plan for Magna Park and a requirement for development at Magna Park to respect and maintain the physical separation between Unnesthorpe and Magna Park. Proposed modifications include a minor amendment to policy SA02 in relation to land south of Gartree Road to increase the number of forms of entry of the primary school and to clarify the secondary school requirements. We've proposed to strengthen policies DSO4 and DMO3 to highlight the importance of the rural character and historic development of the district, and to amend DMO6 to reflect latest government policy and guidance in relation to a vision-led approach to the planning of transport infrastructure. Finally, just to conclude in terms of the recommendation, so officers considered that the local plan is ready for examination, capable of being found sound and to meet all legal tests and requirements. There are a lot of significant issues in those representations, and all of that will go to the inspector for a thorough review and consideration. The inspector will identify all of the matters and issues which the inspector wishes to hear more about and will issue a timetable for the receipt of further evidence, whether that's either written or in verbal format. The recommendation is to proceed to this process to enable the local plan to get into the examination process and for all of these issues to be addressed and discussed in public. During that stage, as I say, the recommendation is for the local plan as it currently stands to be endorsed as a material consideration such that it can guide planning applications in the process prior to its adoption. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Tess. Thanks for presenting that. Right, so we'll now open the discussion up to members of the panel. And then I'm happy to take any questions or comments from other councillors that are sitting over there on my right with us this evening. So who would like to start? I'm sure I'll be looking at you, Councillor King.
Before I do, Chair, first of all, I want to thank members of the public who've come here this evening in significant numbers, and because I know that it's quite an effort is involved in doing that, and for those who've put in questions, I'd just like to clarify, will all the questions that have been submitted and all the responses be made available to Cabinet before Monday's meeting in writing, and will they be?
That
made
makes
available?
absolute sense that happens. I mean, they will formally be published, I'm advised, as part of the minutes of this meeting. But yes, it would be absolutely right that they'd be available to Cabinet on Monday.
And we all get a copy of it, because obviously there's a lot of information that was exchanged verbally, but we haven't got any written information in front of us that we've been able to see. So just want confirmation that's going to be the case.
Let me just take some advice. We can certainly have it ready for all members by the Cabinet on Monday. If it's going to Cabinet, there's no reason why it can't be available to all members.
I would hope so. Okay, there's two.
It will be. Okay, it's all right.
But you're on the Cabinet, so
I've just said it will be. Okay.
Excellent. Thank you, Chair. I've got two queries. We're just picking up from previous meeting. I'd just like to clarify these. This was from the 9th of December. We requested a meeting with Urban and Civic and Homes England to the panel. The notice, it says it was in progress with Democratic Services. To the best of my knowledge, that's not happened because I haven't been invited to a meeting. And just wondering if what's happening about that. The second thing was on the 21st of January meeting, it was suggested that a reminder would be sent to neighbourhood plan bodies to say they can start the review of their neighbourhood plans and they don't have to wait for the local plan to be submitted. Again, I just would like confirmation that's actually been undertaken if it hasn't been done already. Thank you.
Okay, so on the second, I'll need to check on that. I don't suppose we know tonight. That would fall to, we'd ask Matt Bills to do that, unless you know. No, neighbourhood plans. No, we'll make sure you get an answer on that because I'd like to know the answer to that.
Be a good idea.
Okay, on the first, Urban and Civic have indicated, and it's partly addressed in what the statement the director laid out, that they are now ready to engage with members, with the public, with parishes, with whoever wants to talk to them. So we now have a contact established, and we'll be making arrangements for that to happen. I imagine it will need to happen on a number of levels, particularly with regard to the public, and that I would hope that would happen locally in the Great Glen, Oadby area. In relation to them coming to a meeting of this panel, I will ask the director to put that to them as part of this engagement work that they're now commencing.
Okay, great, thank you. So just to address a few points, if I may, Chair. So David read out a statement from Urban and Civic about what they've done so far. And what I want to say about that, so far there's been no discussion with residents or community representatives about any aspect of what they're doing. No one asked the government to allocate this site under their Fast Homes Accelerator. And what's incredibly disappointing is despite us asking on the 9th of December for a meeting with Urban and Civic and Homes England, we still haven't had that arranged. And it's a pretty fundamental part of the plan, key thing for delivering of homes. And so I'm very concerned about this, as I have been the whole way along, and I haven't changed my view about this. I'm just going to read something now. So in the local plan vision, page 25, Appendix A, it says by 2041, the community and residents of Harbour District will have benefited from the development of new homes and workspaces, while the place maintains its mainly rural character. Really, the district will continue to be characterised by attractive rolling countryside with distinctive villages and picturesque market towns. New developments will complement the established townscape and landscape character. Well, I find what's in this plan to be somewhat incompatible with that vision. To be quite frank, yeah.
And okay, so okay, please don't do that.
I'm
Okay,
not
Pascal.
saying it for audience clapping. I'm saying this because to me that doesn't rhyme, doesn't really
Okay.
chime
Yeah.
what's in the bulk of this.
You know as well as I do, and I'll get the director again. He read out a very, very long statement about what the government's requiring us to do at the last meeting. And you know as well as I do that the housing targets set to this council, to every council, are now mandatory. That the government wants to deliver 1.5 million homes during the life of this parliament. Whether that's achievable or not, but that is what they've told us is going to happen. And we as a local council need to produce a plan, otherwise we are going to have speculative development in the form of planning applications coming at us for the next few years. Hang on. Well, it's not, because they're coming in every day, speculative applications, and without a local plan, we can't stop them. So the plan, let me finish. The plan as proposed and the process we're going through, Councillor King, is no different to the one that you proposed some years ago when you put forward, there were 3 sites. One was at Kibworth, that didn't go forward. One was at Scraptoft, that did go forward, and the other was at Lutterworth. So you might not like the proposals in the plan, but the process that we're following is no different than you did in 2018, 2019. And the bottom line is we have to have a local plan if we're going to stop these planning applications coming in.
Okay, Chair, if I can just, I hadn't actually finished, Chair, with,
Okay.
please. What I was going to say before, and I'm not playing this for audience, I'm just saying, to me, that opening paragraph in the vision is not right. Okay, I think it's presenting a vision that is not really compatible with what's in this plan. I've said it before. I've said it in my representations, which are in the public domain. I do think there needs to be some thought about the wording of this. Because I don't really think it's, I mean, it sounds like a utopian dream world. And to me, it's not right. So that was point number 1. Second point is on the same page, the last paragraph, it says, the last paragraph on that page, it says residents will shape new development across the district through effective community engagement and proactive neighbourhood planning. Well, as we know, Chair, there are already significant number of applications in the planning system in one form or another for around 15,000 homes, which is nearly 3 times as much as what the local plan actually, the net requirement was of the local plan. And we just heard a statement read out about Urban and Civic and about all the work they've done already that so far hasn't involved any residents or community in getting that far. And I'm just wondering how meaningful this is. Residents will shape new development through effective community engagement, because is that before or after the developers have already come up with their almost oven ready plans about what they think is doable. So that's the second point about that. And what I wanted to say, you said that what we're following is the process that was followed before. Well, I'm sorry, if we were, then I wouldn't be criticising you quite the same way. But I'm not. I don't want to get stuck on that, because that's history and I can't change any of that. But what I do think is that I mean, the plan is very well written, and I'd expect it to be for £3.1 million. But what I do think is since Regulation 18, when certainly members in our group and members of the public raised a significant number of concerns about the spatial strategy, and as has been stated at previous meeting, no changes have been made to that significantly. We've also heard again that there are significant bits of information. In one of the answers to the question, you said there's going to be an education strategy and delivery plan, which is going to be finalised alongside the examination. Now, that may be legal, and I'm not disputing any of that, but is it good sense given that we know that we've got two previous SDAs, Lutterworth East that's currently on a go slow, and Scraptoft North, which has had to be written off because of viability issues. And here we are. Currently, we do not know whether SIL. You just said that the cabinet has agreed to SIL going forward, subject to viability assessments. Well, we're not going to know the outcome of those viability assessments for some months. Yet, in the letter of collaboration that's been added to the pack from the county council, where it says that SIL is going to be the only route by which it can secure funding for critical infrastructure delivery. I'm sort of in a bit of a kind of there's a question mark there about, well, is the quantum of SIL going to be enough? I mean, it won't be enough for everything. I get that, but will it be enough for the essentials? Schools? Will it be essential for the roads, the highways, those basic things that are going to be needed in order to make this plan and the major sites within it deliverable? Now, I've got no means of actually knowing that, and I don't think the cabinet are going to know that on Monday. You're not going to have time to sort it out. So there are a whole heap of things here where I think we're still not really sure and not really clear as we ought to be and need to be, in my view, to say, yep, that 1,500 pages of information is going to do what it says on the tin. Because at the minute, I having read as much as I can of it in the time allowed, I'm not convinced by that argument. And I think, for me, at the moment, these bits of information are quite important, not just quite, they're very important, as the head of service said last week in the closed session last week. These bits of important information we still haven't got. So I think it's really concerning me. Now, what the options are, I don't know. I know we need a local plan, and I'm not denying that. But I'm concerned, is this plan going to be deliverable, given that we've got historic sites that haven't delivered for a variety of different reasons, and we're currently got pressures on viability for all sorts of reasons. And with the moment, in my mind, now I've heard what the officers have said, but I haven't got the clarity and at the moment that is actually deliverable. And if, for example, we know there are problems with the SIL assessment and SIL viability, if that gets pushed down and pushed back even more than it was already looking at, that would concern me a great deal, given that such a major tranche, this site, and particularly the A6 corridor in Market Harborough, is very, it's going to be very reliant on that to actually get some of this major infrastructure delivered, and that's my concern, Chair. And what the options are, I'm not sure, but
Okay.
there you go. Thank you.
Okay. On the specific issue of SIL and the pieces of evidence that are not fully ready yet, I'm going to ask the director to respond to that. And he's also got some information from Homes England, which I think will be of relevance.
Well, thank you, Chairman. On SIL, we said, I think previously, including in the cabinet report, SIL preparatory evidence works underway. Evaluation works going on in terms of viability and zoning across the district, where we can charge SIL, where it's viable to charge it into different levels on different types of development, and where it isn't. So we'll have all that objective information for cabinet to make a decision on whether to publish a charging schedule in the late spring, early summer. So that is underway. It can progress in parallel with the local plan. If we publish a schedule, we'll consult on it, and then if that comes back with a favourable position, we can then push it and submit it to examination, and there'll be an examination similar to the local plan, and then we get a report and we adopt it, or again a member decision on SIL, and that can all proceed over about a year or 18 months in parallel with the finalisation of the local plan. Chairman, I didn't know if you wanted me to read out a statement I've also got here from Homes England. So this is from the government.
But I just come back, can we just deal with the SIL issue first? So the director's just said SIL is underway, and I understood that, and it could be favourable were the words used, but then it might not be favourable. And then the question I have, Chair, is then what? Where does that leave us if it isn't favourable? And at the moment, I've seen no information, no detailed information. We had a in confidential briefing about it, but that concerns me, and it certainly, I'm sure, concerned Councillor Page and others in our group about it. And what we've now seen from the County Council is that they're very clear about this, that without SIL, major pieces of the infrastructure, essential infrastructure, will not be able to be delivered. Section 106 will not do it. So the question I have is, where is the money going to come from if SIL is not favourable? And that is a big question, Chair, which I don't think you can leave unanswered and just let it, you can't not say unanswered. You can't not have the answer to that before you send off this plan. Because if we send this plan off and, the infrastructure can't be delivered, then how are we actually going to get the infrastructure?
Okay. But I'll ask the director to respond, but there's no stopping this process in the sense that I hear what you're saying, but you'll have noticed in the statement from Urban and Civic, they are going to submit a planning application in the summer.
Well, that's down
Okay.
to them, isn't it?
So yeah, it is down to them. The law allows them to do that, but you also know that once they do that, as the local planning authority, we have to assess that application and we have to make a decision on it. If we don't make a decision on it, it will go to non-determination and then it will go to appeal. So if there is a planning application, these issues that you're raising will have to be addressed at that time. And some of the detail is never addressed until there is a planning application. And you know that because that was the situation with Lutterworth, it's the situation with all developments. There's only a certain amount of detail at this stage, and the rest of it has to come and has to be assessed, and there will be a viability assessment on the planning application, all that normal process that you know. So I'll ask the director now to comment on what you're saying about where we are now and what events are going to happen anyway and are going to overtake us if we don't take action.
Just if I may, Chair, that's great, but we did say a couple of months ago that we'd expected to see more detail on SIL by now. I know we haven't, but the last point I wanted to make on this, Chair, is all the bits of information that we've been told still outstanding. Can we have a comprehensive list of what's outstanding and when it's expected to actually be delivered by, and how it's actually going to be? We're going to get that information. Because I think, again, Cabinet should be informed of what is actually still outstanding. It's been mentioned a few times over the last few weeks that bits missing, or they've been delayed, or they've only got the draft reports and it haven't been signed off, and this, that, the other. Well, what is that? So I think we need a comprehensive list, which we don't have at the moment. And again, not trying to, but I do think that's really important so everyone understands what it is that's still due to come forward.
Okay.
Thank you.
Director.
Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Chairman. So, community infrastructure levy, it's a matter for members to adopt it at the end, of course. By the way, I should have said at the outset, completely understand Councillor King's questions and the sentiment he expresses, and worked with Councillor King for a long time, so I understand where he's coming from with this. When we did the last local plan, we didn't have a community infrastructure levy. We relied exclusively on Section 106 for the strategic sites we had and the small scale and medium scale sites that we had in the plan then. So by pursuing a SIL, it gives us the opportunity to have an additional tool in our toolbox. So arguably, I would suggest to the councillors that it's a strengthening of the ability to satisfy infrastructure requirements. We've got an additional chance of achieving funding through an additional mechanism. Did you want me to read from the Homes England?
Yes, please, because it puts more detail on it.
So I've got in my, if people members will indulge me, I've got a statement also from Homes England on behalf of the government. The development is being brought forward. This is the land south of Gartrey Road development. Is being brought forward by Urban and Civic, a leading master developer, and Homes England, the government's housing and regeneration agency. Together, they bring exceptional experience of creating nationally recognised places with a proven ability to deliver critical infrastructure early, unlocking sustainable communities. The master plan includes approximately 4,000 homes, including affordable homes, alongside essential community infrastructure such as schools, local centres and employment. Over 225 acres of restored parkland will be provided for the benefit of existing communities and new residents, including significant nature recovery, restoring watercourses and improving flood resilience. The scheme will include investment in bus services, highway improvements and walking and cycling connections. Land south of Gartrey Road is an important priority under the government's new Accelerator programme announced in 2024. As part of this, the project was presented to the Homes England Investment Committee, which includes members of the agency's board, alongside representatives from the Ministry of Housing, Communities and Local Government, MHCLG, and His Majesty's Treasury. The Investment Committee endorsed the proposal to prepare a strategic outline business case for the project by late spring 2026. In order to seek approval for the necessary funding for the accelerated delivery of new homes, education and highways transport infrastructure and other associated interventions that may be required to deliver the project. The next steps will be for the Homes England team, working closely with Urban and Civic and both local planning authorities, that's the Harbour District and Oban Wigston Borough Council, along with Leicestershire County Council and other stakeholders, to prepare a strategic outline business case and full business case for approval by the Investment Committee. This will sit alongside the significant investment that Urban and Civic will be making in the locality as master developer. Urban and Civic and Homes England are committed to engaging extensively and openly with the community throughout this process and as the proposals develop. That's the statement from Homes England Chair. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Kins, well, that was important to have that because that is addressing some of the points you're making in relation to the possible funding gap, and there could well be funding through Homes England to address those issues you've raised.
If I can just come back, so basically the taxpayer is going to have to subsidise the development in order to make it viable, because Homes England is funded by the taxpayer.
But it doesn't work like that, and you know that. Can you just explain?
Well, Homes England is funded by the taxpayer.
Can you explain how it
Treasury.
works, David?
So presumably the
Please,
money's coming
about
from
its grant, and then it has to be repaid.
Yeah, Urban and Civic we've worked closely with Homes England across the country in many developments. Holton's one, there are others in other parts of the country, Cambridgeshire, and so on. Alconbury is another as well. And Homes England provide loan support to Urban and Civic as a commercial master developer, and Urban and Civic pay that money back to Homes England when they have released the liquidity from the development of the site that infrastructure money is supported.
Okay, so they're requiring a taxpayer subsidised loan from Homes England, from the Treasury, in order to get this. That's basically what it is. I know what they are. They're taxpayer subsidised loans backed by the Treasury.
Well,
that's fine. I know what they are. So that's presumably that statement's also going to be included in the pack of information.
absolutely.
Okay, that's great. So I've got one more question, if I may, Chair. And obviously, I'm sure the colleagues have got plenty to say about it, hopefully. So as you recall, the at Regulation 19, Stop the New Town made submissions. Well, they encouraged 2,370 individuals to make a submission to the Reg 19 consultation. So the question is, how is that being presented in the submission pack? Because I couldn't actually see that referenced anywhere, unless I've missed it because I hadn't got as far as that. So I'm just be grateful if that could just be explained how that's actually being presented in this pack of information.
Okay,
Thank you.
I'll ask Tess to respond to your question.
Yeah, no problem. Thank you, Chair. So Appendix E, the consultation statement. So the consultation statement is quite lengthy because it follows the whole of the local plan process. I believe it's at section 5.2. It starts, so it starts at Reg 18 and then it moves on to Reg 19. So right at the start of the Reg 19 section, it says, the number of representations, and then it says one of those representations was submitted on behalf of 2,370 people. If you look, sorry, I'm just going to carry on because I can't hear in detail. If you look on the online portal, we have enabled all of those consultation comments to be seen. So where the consultation was initially published and people were advised to comment online, in the same location you can now read everybody's comments. So if you go into the relevant policy, you will see the full submission from Stop the Newtown, and you'll also see the list of people who've signed up to that particular representation. Thank you.
Does that answer your question, Councillor King?
So I'm just asking because I couldn't see it, but I can see what you're talking about. Okay. I mean, presumably if they got further comments about how that's being presented, they can make them. If they've got comments about how the information is being presented, then
For purpose of clarification. Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
Yeah.
That's great. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Right. Who's next? Councillor Page.
Thank you, Chairman. Councillor King is always a hard act to follow because he never leaves you anything else to raise. Well, true, that is very true. Just to go back, you didn't answer Councillor King's questions of a list to attach to what bits are missing, because that would be very, very useful to have. Because if we are going to, look or vote through a local plan, we need to know what we see.
Councillor Page, I took advice, and yes, that will happen as well.
Okay, that sounds wonderful.
And can I just answer what I remember? One other thing, Councillor King was asking about when members were going to be have a hearing with Urban and Civic. We have on the 12th of March an all-member briefing on the local plan ahead of the council meeting. That is just for members, and that was your question, that it was when will members be able to question them. We could ask them to come to that.
If I may, Chair, on the 9th of December, we said for them to come to this panel and speak to, and so we could go over there.
They've only started engaging with us in the last couple of days, as far as I'm concerned, at a member level. Okay, so we can't make them, but now they are. Yeah, absolutely. Come to this panel. But you had asked about members, and there is a member briefing on the 12th of March, so we could ask them to come to that, and that would be in addition to them getting to come to a meeting of this panel.
That probably wouldn't be enough time, I wouldn't have thought, for that.
It wouldn't what?
I don't think there'd be enough time on that call for all of that, as well as this and doing Urban and Civic on the same calls. Yeah.
Okay. Well, you want a particular meeting?
Well, I'm just wondering. I'm just thinking now.
You're already in the calendar, Cap.
I know the 12th of March is, but I just think the 12th of March was specifically about the local plan. But if you don't ask Urban and Civic, then you might have to ask other people. Whereas we did want to do, a bit more of a detailed session with them about it.
We'll take on board what you're saying.
Thank you. Okay.
Okay. Right, carry on, please, Rosita.
Right. So I'm going to go down a different avenue. Now, as you can see, I've skim read, and I even had it printed out, but there's an awful lot to read within a couple of days. So I haven't studied it in detail. However, I would like a few bits of clarification. One of the things I'd like clarification on, it is the separation area between Ullathorpe and Magna Park. And when you're saying in the local plan Ullathorpe, I assume you mean the other villages as well, like Ashby Barber and whatever. Now, I can only see that it says, and it refers to a separation area. Well, and separation area can be 5 centimeters. So I assume that was set out in the master plan. What assures us within policies that we can get a separation area that is substantial, so the residents are not harmed by light pollution, noises, and air pollution. So that is my question, my first question.
Should we get an answer on that?
Yeah, go on then. I've got
The extent of the separation area, please, Tess.
Yeah, sure, no problem. So the separate, can you hear me okay?
Well, put it down a bit, yeah.
I'm trying to avoid it distorting. Is that okay? So the separation area between Alresthorpe and the proposed allocation at Magna Park is set out in the policies map. So it hasn't changed since we published it last March. What has changed is the specific reference within the Magna Park policy to it. So although it was there before, the policy didn't specifically refer to it. But what we're proposing is that the policy refers specifically to it, so it can't inadvertently be overlooked. But the area of separation is as published last March.
So to just confirm, that policy now strengthens the need, yeah?
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Okay, I'm happy with that for now. Now, in some of my villages and in some areas, we have got an awful lot of development, and as we know, Severn Trent and the water authorities have a right to connect to sewers, and all of the sewers are old 8-inch sewers, and you know, we are suffering a real throwback, and in some areas in Lutterworth, you know, the water comes out of the toilets and out of the sinks. So how are we ensuring, or can we ensure within policies, or have we got anything in here that ensures that if we're going down the road of approving, that at least all the people who go and buy these new houses don't have sewers coming out of, you know? So can you try to answer that for me?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Page. Yeah, happy to. So the local plan, as is normally the case, the local plan does some amount of evidence and investigation into things like infrastructure provision and capacity, and then it's done in much more detail, you know, through the planning applications. So the infrastructure delivery plan has liaised with all of the infrastructure providers to ensure there is sufficient capacity in existing networks, or liaised to ensure that if there are plans, they are timed in accordance with proposals for growth. At the planning application stage, it will be looked at in much more detail. So each planning application, there will be a consultation where relevant with Environment Agency, local lead, flood authority, but also sewerage and water infrastructure providers. So in some cases, they have come back and said there is an issue at a planning application stage, and we've had to put in conditions or find a way to ensure that their issue is resolved, but it is dealt with at detail in the planning application stage.
Right, my last question for now. So in the plan, we're saying ready to take actions in a climate change environment. Now, when and if we're building all of the stuff and we're plastering lots of concrete, like 140 hectare of Magna Park over good farmland and loads of buildings, we need real good sods. Now, there are policies that cover sods, but, and I'm going to do a chairman's thing now, when we're talking about the last local plan, we put in, which you well remember, a lot of policies to try to combat overcome climate change. We tried to do solar, we tried to do rainwater runoff, underground heating, and then the inspector went, whoopee-doo-dah, stuff it and chucked it out. So I looked through here and I thought, well, this time they will have another go and put these policies back in to see whether, we are lucky. But I can't see any. And there is a lot of reference to things like irrigation, rainwater for irrigation, and all of this stuff, which to me, all the water runoff and everything, it's not strong enough to overcome the, as you so nicely say, the action to alleviate climate change. So how do you, well, I can't find a policy, and tell me if there are a policy. If there isn't, how can we address this when we have a new development, that we have a strong enough policy that we ensure not only the SUDs, but there are implementation of the necessary arrangements to make sure we combat the climate change.
So that one.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Page. Yes, and I remember that debate a lot in the last local plan. So in this local plan, we have got, I just reminded myself, policies DM07 through to DM11 essentially are around development management policies to ensure that proposals come forward in a way which is cognizant of climate change. So just to run through those, we've got DMO7, which is managing flood risk, DMO8, which is sustainable drainage, which includes the requirement for SUDs. We've got DMO9, which is sustainable construction and climate resilience, DM10, which is biodiversity and geodiversity protection enhancement, and DM11, which is managing impacts on land and water quality. So we think in the local plan there is sufficient policy, but I absolutely take your point, and the inspector clearly has to take account of the latest government policy and guidance, and that is changing all the time. And we've currently got a draft NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, which sets out the government's latest policy on this. And two things just to draw people's attention to is, one, that draft NPPF proposes introducing a requirement that prevents local plans putting in place these kinds of technical requirements which go over and above national. And my understanding is it's to prevent developers dealing with a kind of plethora of different requirements across different local authority boundaries, which obviously adds cost. So that's the government's proposal. They are also proposing, obviously, the introduction of national development management policies, which, although not statutory, would also play a significant role in the determination of planning applications. So those two things combined, I would say, means that the planning inspectorate will need to review all of our policies in light of that latest government position and take a view on those particular policies. But for now, I think they do a really good job in hopefully addressing the kind of questions that you're raising.
So if I may come back being a little bit pessimistic here. So what you're telling me, your policies are aligned with the new NPPF. And so the government has tied our hands again not to incur the builder any more unnecessary expense and aggravation. And they are getting away with creating more concrete without any repercussions. But so in a nutshell, as you are the kind of expert in this, do you think if the inspector allows these, that we as a planning authority have got strong enough policies to say, for instance, if a development of 3,000 houses comes along, that we could make the developer implement all of these wonderful things like ground heating and things like that? Do you think that would be possible, or is that again a big question mark?
Yeah, thank you. On that particular question, I suspect we're not in a position to require a particular solution. But certainly the policies, in my view, are strong enough to ensure that a developer does a significant contribution towards ensuring developments are appropriate in an era of climate change. But it's really difficult to impose a particular solution on a developer simply because of cost reasons, but also because of technology changing over time. But yeah, I do think these policies are strong enough. Thank you.
Rob Thornhill, do you want to add to that?
Yeah, it's just on the SUDS issue. So I think there's something like 35 references to SUDS throughout the document, but the key one in terms of making sure that SUDS come forward is DMO8, which basically says all major development must incorporate SUDS. So it's a really strong policy. There's no ambiguity there. Any development of 10 or more homes must have a SUDS or use SUDS in their design.
That's stronger than the current plan.
Well, I've not checked the wording of the current plan, but it's just, you can't get any stronger than that. It's a simple requirement. You must use it.
Okay, thank you. Right, what members of the panel would like to make a comment or ask any questions, and then I'll open it to other members of the council that are here. Councillor Burrell.
Thank you, Chair. I was just considering that a lot of these proposals to say build 175 and scrapped off are coming in at the ones that are coming at more than that we've put in the local plan. I presume that is okay, because certainly the one at Thurmby has come in at 130 when it's supposed to be 125. The one that scrapped off was supposed to be 175, and they decided that it's much better at 200. And it's a bit misleading for people to think that they'll be getting that amount of development and then suddenly it's increased. And also the speculative ones, when they're coming in at much more than we could even expect. Certainly one in Kidworth has, and we've got one in our area that's actually 900, which has come out of absolutely nowhere. So can the officers comment on what we're doing to sort of rein in these ridiculous figures?
So first of all, in terms of local plan sites where it specifies a number, how definite is that? What can we do if they seek to exceed that? And then secondly, on speculative applications that are coming in at significantly, massively more than our housing requirement. Can you address those two?
Thank you, Chairman. So it's not unusual for developers to try and vary figures in the local plan. They often will say, well, you've said 179, we can get potentially with design-led solutions 200. So it's not unusual. The plan sets what is considered to be a benchmark number. It's not unusual for that to fluctuate when we get to detailed planning application stages. It happens in every plan I've been involved in, including the one we adopted in 2019. The sites you're talking about, speculative development, that's why we need the local plan. That the only practical way, as I said at the previous meeting, to stop that, 900 here, 1,000 there, 600 here, 200 there, to stop that pernicious, I think is a fair word to use, not a word I'd use very often in a local plan meeting, but stop that speculative development. Is the only way to do that is to adopt a local plan and to meet the requirements of the National Planning Policy Framework we're making it under, which is the 2023 NPPF. There's no other way to stop it. It would continue, and development management would have to evaluate those schemes, and the planning committee that you're chairman of would have the invidious job of determining them, and then we run the risk of appeals if we sought to refuse them, and run the risk of those schemes being granted on appeal.